Thank you also our leaders from Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, Pfizer and GSK for giving us your valuable time at this time when, as I say, the whole world is looking for a vaccine to end this pandemic. Thank you very much.
We are here today to announce that Johnson & Johnson and 3 of its subsidiaries have agreed to pay more than $2.2 billion to resolve criminal as well as civil claims that they marketed prescription drugs for uses that were never approved as safe and effective, and that they paid kickbacks to both physicians and pharmacies for prescribing and promoting these drugs. This global settlement resolves multiple investigations involving the antipsychotic drugs Risperdal and Invega, as well as the heart drug Natracor and other Johnson & Johnson products. Now, the settlement also addresses allegations of conduct that recklessly put at risk the health of some of the most vulnerable members of our society, including young children, the elderly, and the disabled. In the criminal information that was filed today, we allege that Johnson & Johnson subsidiary, Janssen Pharmaceuticals Incorporated, violated the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act by introducing Risperdal into the market for unapproved uses. Now, the companies allegedly downplayed the serious health risks that were associated with Risperdal, including the risk of stroke in elderly patients, and even paid doctors to induce them to prescribe these drugs. As part of the scheme, the companies allegedly paid kickbacks to the nation's largest long-term care pharmacy, whose pharmacists were supposed to be the gatekeepers to provide an independent review of patient medications. Now, in addition to these claims, we allege that Johnson & Johnson, as well as its subsidiary, Sios Incorporated, promoted the heart failure drug Natracor for off-label uses that caused patients to submit to costly infusions of the drug without credible scientific evidence that it would have any health benefit for those patients. The alleged conduct is shameful, and it is unacceptable. It displayed a reckless indifference to the safety of the American people, and it constituted a clear abuse of the public trust, showing a blatant disregard for systems and laws designed to protect public health. Now, every time pharmaceutical companies engage in this type of conduct, they corrupt medical decisions by healthcare providers. They jeopardize the public health, and they take money out of taxpayers' pockets. Today we are here to announce the latest results of that effort. The pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca has agreed to pay $520 million to federal and state taxpayers to settle claims that it illegally marketed the antipsychotic drug Seroquel for uses that were not approved as safe and effective by the Food and Drug Administration. Now, as part of this scheme, AstraZeneca was accused of illegally promoting Seroquel to physicians and violating the federal anti-kickback statute, all in furtherance of supporting the drug's use for a host of illnesses for which it was never approved.
AstraZeneca paid kickbacks to doctors as part of an illegal scheme to market a drug for unapproved uses. They marketed the drug to the elderly, to children, to veterans, to inmates. And what they did endangers patients and drives up health costs.
By pushing Seroquel for unapproved purposes, AstraZeneca made patients into guinea pigs in an unsupervised drug test. Today's settlement puts a cost on such misconduct. Thank you.
Today I'm pleased to announce that the Justice Department and our law enforcement partners have reached an historic $3 billion resolution with the pharmaceutical manufacturer GlaxoSmithKline, LLC. And this is to resolve multiple investigations into the company's sales, marketing, and pricing practices.
GSK distributed Paxil with false and misleading labeling. What GSK did was to encourage the use of Paxil for children who are dealing with depression with false messages about its safety and effectiveness. including ghostwriting a journal article that misreported the results of a study. GSK promoted Paxil for kids despite the fact that 3 studies that it had conducted failed to demonstrate that Paxil actually worked to treat depression in children. GSK also misbranded Wellbutrin, a drug that was meant for depression, by distributing it for unapproved uses such as weight loss, ADHD, the treatment of sexual dysfunction, and substance addictions such as alcohol, drug, or gambling problems. In promoting Avandia, GSK failed to report safety data to the FDA about the drug, which is a diabetes medication. The data that GSK failed to report is important because the FDA uses it to determine if a drug continues to be safe for its patients. In marketing these drugs and others as well that are incorporated into the civil settlement, GSK sales force bribed physicians to prescribe GSK products using every imaginable form of high-priced entertainment, from Hawaiian vacations to paying doctors millions of dollars to go on speaking tours, to a European pheasant hunt, to tickets for Madonna concerts. And this is just to name a few. These allegations and others are detailed in the papers filed and unsealed today. In those documents, you will find many examples of GSK's misconduct, including a DVD showing senior executives in Las Vegas during a launch for Advair in 2001 who were motivating the sales force by asking, "Who wants to be a millionaire?" and using a slot machine to illustrate how much money they could make in commissions. The more they sold, the more they could make, and in turn, the more GSK would make.
When corporations misbrand a drug, manipulate prices, improperly influence doctors, or keep critical safety information from the light of day, practices like these put our public health at risk, increase costs, and undermine our healthcare system. We're protecting Americans' health by ensuring that pharmaceutical companies do not hide from FDA and the public unsafe effects of their products, as GSK did in this case.
We're here today to announce the resolution of an investigation into the off-label marketing of Rapamune, a drug approved for specific uses in organ transplants by Wyeth Pharmaceuticals. The FDA approved Rapamune for limited use in renal transplants, yet Wyeth trained its sales force to promote Rapamune for off-label uses not approved by the FDA. But to briefly describe the criminal conduct, Wyeth marketed Rapamune for use in patients who had received liver, heart, and other non-renal transplants. Wyeth trained the sales force on off-label extrarenal uses for Rapamune at annual training sessions, semi-annual meetings, and through medical journal articles that discussed off-label studies involving the use of Rapamune for non-kidney transplants. Even though the company was aware of boxed warnings issued by 2003 with regard to use in liver and lung transplants, Wyeth continued to use sales targets that could only be reached through off-label promotion and encourage its sales representatives to target all transplant populations. Wyeth rewarded its sales representatives with bonuses and individual awards. Wyeth identified doctors who appeared enthusiastic about off-label uses of Rapamune and invited them to participate as key opinion leaders in corporate advisory boards and at conferences, for which they were paid generous honoraria as well as full travel expenses. In addition, Wyeth funded research studies for these doctors in an effort to obtain credibility for the unapproved off-label use.
I'm honored to stand here today with dedicated colleagues from within the Department of Justice as well as beyond it to announce a historic settlement with Pfizer Incorporated, a pharmaceutical manufacturer, and its subsidiary Pharmacia and Upjohn company, arising out of civil and criminal allegations relating to Pfizer's allegedly illegal promotion of various drugs, most notably Bextra. In a combination civil and criminal settlement, Pfizer has agreed to pay $2.3 billion, the largest healthcare fraud settlement in the history of the Department of Justice. Within that $2.3 billion is a criminal fine of $1.195 billion, which makes it the largest criminal fine in history.
Today's resolution addresses criminal activity within Pfizer's Pharmacia division regarding the sale and marketing of the drug Bextra. Despite the FDA's decision, Pfizer's marketing machine positioned Bextra for the relief of all manner of acute pain as a complement to Pfizer's drug Celebrex, which it had positioned for use for chronic pain. Pfizer's marketing machine pushed this combination from 2002 through 2005. The marketing machine also pushed Bextra for other off-label uses. Among other things, Pfizer did the following. Pfizer invited doctors to consultant meetings, many in resort locations. Attendees' expenses were paid. They received a fee just for being there. And they were entertained with golf, massages, and other activities. Their job was to help Pfizer figure out how best to promote Bextra for the off-label indications. Pfizer utilized continuing medical education events to promote off-label prescriptions. Pfizer utilized a publication strategy to initiate, fund, sponsor, and sometimes draft articles touting Bextra for unapproved uses. It is for this conduct that Pfizer will pay the largest criminal punishment ever in a healthcare fraud case, a criminal fine of $1.195 billion, together with a forfeiture of $105 million. Among the factors we considered in calibrating this severe punishment was Pfizer's recidivism. This is the fourth Pfizer settlement with the Justice Department this decade. First, in 2002, Pfizer paid $49 million to resolve allegations that it had failed to report to CMS best prices for its drug Lipitor. Second, in May 2004, Pfizer paid $430 million, including a $240 million criminal fine for the off-label promotion of the drug Neurontin. Third, in April 2007, Pfizer and its Pharmacia and Upjohn division, the same division involved here, pled guilty and entered into a deferred prosecution agreement for payment of kickbacks and for off-label promotion of the drug Genotropin. That time, Pfizer paid $34.7 million. Unfortunately, Pfizer is not the only drug company that has participated in healthcare fraud. About a dozen years ago, prosecutors principally in Boston, Philadelphia, and at Maine Justice, but also elsewhere across the country, began criminal investigations of major companies in the drug industry. The first major settlement of these investigations was in 2001. There have since then been 42 other major criminal and civil resolutions against the nation's drug companies.
Pfizer and its subsidiary Pharmacia intended to circumvent specific FDA directives concerning their drugs by using its sales force to aggressively promote off-label uses. To date, we've interviewed numerous physicians, sales representatives, and managers who have corroborated these assertions. These employees were willing to step up and speak out against a corporate giant that was blatantly violating the law and misleading the public through false marketing claims and providing incentives to healthcare providers to induce them to prescribe certain drugs.
Senator Addison.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you and Ranking Member Wyden for this hearing today. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today as well. But I want to talk about a slightly different aspect of your industry right now. We've been talking about drug pricing, which is one part of how drug companies make money. The other part is how you maximize sales. So, Ms. Taubert, I'd like to focus on how your company maximizes sales for a particular class of drugs, opioids. Can you define for me, please, Ms. Taubert, what pseudo-addiction is?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that term.
Well, let me fill you in then. Pseudo-addiction is an unproven and dubious concept that asserts that certain patients present signs of addiction because they were prescribed insufficient doses of opioids. Those peddling this pseudo-addiction concept say that instead of providing addiction treatment when somebody shows the signs of addiction, the doctor should increase their opioid doses. Even one of the original doctors who pushed this theory now admits it was, his quote, an excuse to give patients more drugs. Ms. Tolbert, Janssen promoted this made-up concept of pseudo-addiction on a website that it approved and funded that was called Let's Talk Pain. Since then, your company has repeatedly said that your actions, quote, in the marketing and promotion of our opioid pain medicines was appropriate and responsible. So, Ms. Talbert, how can you possibly claim that promoting the theory of pseudo-addiction, that doctors should prescribe more opioids to patients showing signs of addiction, was appropriate and responsible?
Senator, thank you so much for that question. You know, abuse and addiction, particularly opioid abuse and addiction, are very serious public health concerns, and we recognize the impact on the American public.
So then the question is, and again, like everybody else, I've only got a few minutes here. The question is, why are you looking back at what your company did, promoting pseudo-addiction, an unproved theory that was just used to maximize sales of a deadly drug? Why is that something that you are calling appropriate and responsible?
So I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the term. What I can say is, on behalf of our company, opioids represent less than 1% of our products.
All right, let me stop you right there, because my constituents don't care about the percentage. Yeah. They care about the behavior to maximize sales in an industry. Do you know how many Americans died from drug overdoses in 2017?
Far too many.
70,237. In 1 year, more Americans died from drug overdoses than died fighting the entire war in Vietnam. And the vast majority of those overdose deaths, about 50,000, were from opioids. My constituents are dying. Nearly 500 people in New Hampshire died from overdoses last year, and nearly 500 the years before that. And companies like Janssen and Purdue Pharma fueled this epidemic, employing deceptive and truly unconscionable marketing tactics, despite the known risks, so you could sell more drugs to maximize your profits. And now you are refusing to take responsibility for your company's role in this crisis. So one more time, do you truly think that Janssen's opioid marketing practices were appropriate and responsible? Or will you finally take responsibility for your company's role in helping create this crisis that is killing more than 100 Americans every day?
Everything that I have seen leads me to conclusively believe that everything that we have done with our products when we promoted opioid products, which we stopped marketing a long time ago, was very appropriate and responsible. However, that being said, we do believe that we have a leadership position to take in helping with this. And so we are doing a number of things in terms of mothers and babies and physician and patient education to help.
So let me,
because we recognize
again,
we all play a part in trying to help this, because we realize that
our time is done. But right now, it is hard for me to take the industry's goal here as promoting good health seriously when its behavior to maximize sales of opioids created an epidemic.
Senator Lankford.
We have told you all this before as well. It's shocking, but it pales in comparison to what I'm about to share with you. Pfizer's trial data could have been compromised. A former employee involved in the trials has blown the whistle. She says that Pfizer trial data was falsified. Serious compromises were made in the process. There were not enough trained vaccinators. Investigators were slow to follow up on adverse events. All these allegations have been published in the British Medical Journal, and we have a copy of the report. Now, we at Beyond will tell you about these damaging allegations. Let's tell you about the whistleblower first, the person who had the courage to speak about these medical lapses. Her name is Brooke Jackson. She worked with a company called Ventavaya. Ventavaya is a subcontractor of Pfizer. It is the company that Pfizer hired to conduct the trials. Jackson was involved in the Pfizer vaccine trial, but she didn't last very long. Jackson was fired within 2 weeks. That's because she complained about the lapses. So what were these lapses? Let's tell you about them. Number one, the labs were poorly managed. Pfizer tested its vaccine at more than 150 sites. At 3 sites, there were clear red flags. The biggest one is linked to the patients. Their identities could have been compromised. At one of the sites, Jackson found vaccine packaging just left out in the open. The packaging had the identification numbers of the participants on it. This is a very serious lapse. You see, when a vaccine is put through a trial, not everyone gets the shot. Only half of them are given the vaccine. The rest are given what is known as a placebo. Who has got what needs to remain a secret. This is how you protect the integrity of the trial. But here, their identification numbers were just left out in the open. Anyone who saw it could identify the patients who got the vaccine, and they could potentially try to influence the outcome. This wasn't the only lapse, sadly. Let's come now to problem number 2. Apparently, Ventavaya, the company conducting the trials, did not have adequate staff. Some patients showed symptoms consistent with the coronavirus. There were not enough people present to collect the swab samples for a test. Reports say this lapse could have skewed the data altogether. This entirely defeats the very purpose of a trial. Jackson, the whistleblower, made 6 other observations that can potentially skew the results. They are a part of this report, and let's now read it out for you. Participants placed in a hallway after injection and not being monitored by clinical staff. The lack of timely follow-up of patients who experience adverse events. Protocol deviations not being reported. Vaccines not being stored at proper temperatures. Mislabeled lab specimens, and targeting Ventavaya staff for reporting these types of problems. What did Jackson do about these problems? First, she raised them with the company. Nothing happened. Then she went to the trial sites herself. She gathered photographic evidence of the problems. Instead of fixing them, the company questioned Jackson herself. She decided to escalate the matter, wrote to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. This is the American regulator that approves vaccines, the one that also approved Pfizer. So what did the FDA do about her complaint? They sent her an acknowledgement saying that the FDA, and I'm quoting, could not comment on any investigation that her complaint might open. A few days later, Jackson received a phone call. It was from an FDA inspector. They discussed the complaint, and after that, nothing happened. You might dismiss this report saying it's just one woman's version, but there's so much more to this story. There are other former employees of the company who had similar concerns. One of them wrote to Jackson and said this, and I quote, "Everything that you complained about was spot on." 2 other former employees have also spoken about the same issue. Their identities, of course, remain hidden. One of them said they had never experienced such a helter-skelter work environment. Here is another quote. "I've never had to do what they were asking me to do ever. It just seemed like something a little different from normal, the things that were allowed and expected." One of them raises serious doubts about the data. "I don't think it was good, clean data. It's a crazy mess." We're talking about the world's leading pharma giant and the world's leading drug regulator. Both evidently cut corners and ignored red flags. Pfizer and the FDA want the world to trust their assessments. These revelations show that they cannot be taken at face value.